Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Surf and Sales podcast with Richard Harris, my good friend. I'm Scott Leese. We're joined today by Nick Casale, the Director of Sales from Sendoso. Sendoso has been one of our favorite companies for the last couple years. We're big fans and supporters, and they've been a part of Surf and Sales a few times.
They've been a couple of times sponsor, right?
What's that?
They've sponsored, what, 2 or 3 times,
Yeah,
I think.
two or three times sponsor, for sure.
So first of all, thank you for that. We appreciate it. We would not be doing this podcast. We wouldn't be doing Surf and Sales. Genuinely, we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't have folks like you guys. So thank you very much to Sendoso.
So, Nick, welcome to the show, man.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah. How are you adjusting working from home? I know you're a big in-office energy guy.
I am. I definitely miss the energy. And, sadly, I don't have my podcast time in the morning anymore. So I was thinking I might just start having to walk around my house for 30 minutes so I can listen to Surf and Sales every morning here.
Yeah. You got a dog? Take the dog for a long walk.
Exactly. Yeah. Unfortunately, the dog is like 10 at this point, and I can barely get her to the end of the driveway. So I might just, stick her on a skateboard. It's my parents' golden retriever here.
Oh, nice. Name?
Her name is KB. It's actually it's a place in Miami where we grew up.
Okay.
It's called Key Biscayne. So that's a little.
I know Key Biscayne.
Yeah.
There you go.
Big tennis tournament out there every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is. It was the NASDAQ when I lived there. I forget what it's called now.
Yeah.
How old were you when you got the dog? Just out of curiosity, how old were you?
I was 17.
You were 17, and so were you out of the house at that point, pretty much, or no?
Yeah, I was just starting to get out of the house. This is probably the most time I've actually spent with this dog consecutively. So we're bonding.
Good.
You did. So you grew up in Florida. So tell us kind of your origin story into sales. Were you selling at an early age, or did you stumble into the field? Give us a lowdown.
Yeah, so I like to think I got a lot of sort of sales by osmosis growing up. Yeah, my dad was in sales for forever, and as part of that, we moved around a couple times. So he was pretty early on at EMC, which you guys will know, and a lot of the younger listeners won't. So I was born in Boston, moved to Paris when I was 6 years old because he was doing some EMEA sales, and then moved to Miami when I was 8, and he was doing LATAM. So it was in Miami up until really kind of 8 to 18 there. So pretty formidable years. And then went back to Boston to go to college at Boston College. So I got into sales totally by accident. Really was kind of that college kid with no idea what he wanted to do. Knew I loved kind of talking to people, knew I loved, getting out there and kind of having conversations, but didn't know really how to apply that. So long story short, fell into really startups before I fell into sales, and was just kind of sitting around with a few buddies one night, junior year, and we heard about this thing called the Boston College Venture Competition. And we were like, all right, that sounds like a lot of fun. We can come up with an idea. If this really kind of goes the distance, we get $20,000 to work on it for the summer, and that sounded a lot.
What were you studying at that point? By your junior year, what had you decided was your major?
Yeah, so I was in the School of Business, and I was a marketing major because finance sounded hard.
Dude, that was me. Like, I didn't do finance or econ. I just got a general business degree. So I feel your pain.
Yeah. So I was doing that. Wasn't necessarily passionate about marketing. And I mean, it's funny because I don't know how many of those marketing courses are even relevant. And I sell to marketing now. But it's like, I think I did a whole course on survey design. I don't think I've ever had to design a survey. But anyway, I was having fun with kind of the idea of starting something with a friend of mine. And so we basically decided that, and we thought if we won $20,000, it'd be more fun to work on a startup than to go get jobs for the summer. So we were like, all right, let's see what we got. And we
just
basically,
out of curiosity, as a junior, and you're like, wow, 20 grand. Do you go like, wow, that's like so much money? Or you're like, it's 20 grand.
Oh, we were going to split it 3 ways, and it still was going to be like so much money. And we were like, we could pay our rent for the summer. We could pay for food, and we could pay for beer for the summer. Right. I mean, that was like the dream at that. That was like an IPO.
Weren't even included in that. You didn't even know what taxes were at that point, right?
Oh no, yeah. That I actually think that when that tax bill did come, we were like, "What's this?" So that was actually a rude awakening.
Who's this FICO, and why am I having to pay him?
Yeah, exactly. I think I threw it away. I was like, no, I'm a student. That's not for me. So long story short, we basically decided that the college application process was like screwed up. It's actually the way that you guys would apply to college if you applied to college. Scott, you didn't go to college, did you?
Yes, I did.
Oh, you did go to college? Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
I made that up.
Made that up.
I totally made that up.
I went to college for 4 years.
You went to Arizona.
I went to grad school at Arizona State.
Okay.
Richard went to U of A.
That is
there it is.
hilarious. Scott, you didn't go to college.
Scott, you didn't go to college.
Natural
I think
assumption.
that's like a badge of honor.
Yeah,
Right.
That's
I'll
better.
take it. He's redeeming himself now.
Go with it. It's better if you didn't.
That might be the quote. That might be the episode title. Scott,
Yeah.
you didn't go to college, did you?
Scott, you didn't go to college, did
You
you?
didn't go to college. You went to ASU. That would make sense.
Yeah. So anyway, as you guys know, because you did go to college, the application process sucks. It's that piece of paper, same thing. So we were like, all right, what if kids could do this online? We make it more like LinkedIn and the Common App, whatever. And
what year was this, just to give context for folks?
this would have been 2013. Yeah. So we're like, all right, that sounds like fun. And kind of long story short, ran with it. Ended up winning, got to work on it for the summer, and just fell in love with the startup thing. And when push came to shove, we realized that it wasn't really an idea we were excited enough to work on for 10 years. I think this was right around the time Social Network came out. So we had in our minds that this was going to blow up and we were going to be rich within a year.
Yeah.
And then a mentor was basically like, guys, best case here is you're working on it for 10 years. That's best case. And that kind of scared us out of it.
Yeah.
So we bailed on that, but kind of took with us the passion for startups. And when I was kind of thinking about what I loved about working on that, it was really the working with the prospective customers, understanding kind of what they liked, what they didn't like, what their challenges were, how we could solve them.
For folks who don't know about Sendoso, can you give them a quick spiel on what it is you guys do and what that sale is like, and the sales cycle and the average contract value and all this kind of thing?
Yeah. So Sendoso helps you make more human connections with your prospects, customers, employees. We do that by streamlining the process of sending just about anything you could think of to those people. So that could be, welcome kit to an employee. That could be coffee gift card to someone you're trying to get on the phone. Just about anything in between there.
You guys even stepped up with us for surf and sales, and you made these really cool. Scott, do you have one around? I don't have one. We're making these really cool surfboard wax cones.
Yep.
That also had our logo branded on it. This little logo with the 3 surfboards. So it's pretty cool what you guys can do. So it's not like, just for people who are listening and might be interested, it doesn't have to be traditional stuff. Like, you can get really creative, really customized, which personalization matters. So I think that's super cool.
Yeah, personalization absolutely does matter here. And we're really taking a space where the funny part is we talk to a lot of big companies, and they'll look at it and say, oh, you guys are a direct mail company. We've been doing that stuff forever. Right. And then there's the startups who say our email response rates are plummeting. We can't get people on the phone as effectively. We really want to try this whole like sending stuff thing. So there's sort of two halves of the market where there's the startups that are like, okay, this makes sense. Then there's, if you talk to any big company, they've been doing this stuff forever and they stink at tracking it. So it's an interesting, we got kind of challenges on both sides there and an opportunity on both sides, but it's been a ton of fun. I joined actually 2.5 years ago as the first sales rep. So the CEO and founder.
You were the original sales rep.
I was, yeah.
Wow.
Third employee.
What's that like? I'm sure there's people out there who, maybe are the first sales rep at a company right now, or might have an offer and have thought about being the first sales rep. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges and the opportunity, that comes along with being the first sales hire in a company?
Yeah. So for me, I always say, I think the smaller that you're evaluating a company, the more you have to look at the team. And for me with Sendoso, I mean, if you're looking at any company that's, a couple 100,000 in revenue and 3 people sitting in a room, you've got to really like those people, and you got to be ready to basically go to war with that team and realize that even if it goes well, it's going to be incredibly hard. And that's best case, it's really hard. So you've got to be excited to kind of work with that team and realize that you're going to have challenges that you have to work on and overcome, because it's really hard to look at any company that size and truly pick a winner. I mean, VCs do this, right, for a living, and they're wrong 90% of the time or something like that. So you're probably not going to be right at a higher percent than a VC, and you don't get to make 20, 30 bets. You get one if it's your job.
What did you look for, right, as you were going into that role? Because I've had this happen, and it's not been successful for me, and I own my piece of that. But what were the things that you looked for to say, okay, I like these types of founders, I like this company? Like, how did you know it was going to be a good fit for you, or what indicated it was going to be a good fit for you, not necessarily knowing it?
Yeah, so for me, it was 2 factors. One was the CEO, Chris, was a guy that I'd worked with previously. So actually taking a step back, even between college and Sendoso, I joined a company called TalkDesk. And I was the first SDR that was hired out of San Francisco. There was already a team in Portland. And my kind of first day, I go into the office. We have this beautiful 12th floor in downtown San Francisco, just raised 20 million. There's 5 AEs sitting in the room. The office is maybe 10% full because they just signed the lease. And I sit down at a desk with these 5 AEs, no idea what I'm doing. One of them's Chris Rudegrab. Guy I get to know obviously very well over the next 2 years they're working there. And he at some point leaves to go work on some coffee sending startup that no one really understood. So when Chris reached out to me a couple months later to say, this is kind of working out, do you want to come, do this with us? The biggest thing that was pushing me toward a yes was working with Chris, because he was someone that anyone who's ever worked with him would tell you. I mean, Chris just kind of gets shit done.
But what's that? Yeah, talk about that. What are the things about Chris, aside from the fact that you'd known him and you'd worked with him, right? So that meant there's some rapport and stuff.
Yeah.
But, get shit done, I get it. But like, what does that mean? Like, give people ideas of like, hey, I think I'm going to go be a first-time salesperson. Here's what I should pay attention to when I look at that founder.
Well, your founder needs to understand sales, right? Or at least express a strong desire to provide you the autonomy to do that.
But there's so many.
You're a unicorn.
Yeah, you're a unicorn. There's so many startups that don't have that.
Totally.
Right?
And I think that's a huge, I mean, so I would say you need to either understand sales, or you need to be, if you're looking at that founder, they need to either understand sales or
stay the hell out of the way.
Be incredibly self-aware. Yes, Scott, to that point, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of Chris's strong suits. He understands sales, but I've actually been impressed with how much he lets the sales team, which, initially that was kind of me. Now we have a great CRO, Sam East, and he does a great job of letting the sales team operate, even though he does know sales.
How much of the early work was you putting together like the sales process and the pitch and strategy versus you just executing? I think one of the things that is interesting with first sales hires is, I think it's very difficult for a lot of them to kind of look at it with like director, VP level eyes versus just picking up the phone. So how much of that were you doing in the role with Sendoso versus just picking up the phone and off you go because maybe Chris or somebody else had said, here's the process that I want you to follow? What was the balance there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I was 100% operating as account executive number 1 plus, SDR basically. I mean, Chris is great at doing some hacky stuff, and there's probably a whole funny story there, but we had a bunch of fake people that on LinkedIn worked at Sendoso, and Chris had some bots that were out, pinging. And so I got some meetings that were flowing in, my calendar was full, but I was just executing, right? I was operating as an AE, and I was testing messaging, testing price points, testing demo flow. Should this first call be 15, then 45? Do we want to do 30 minutes each time? What does our sales process look like? And just kind of iterating on the fly to try to hone in on what was getting deals across the line.
Did you know?
That's one thing that
on your own, Nick? Did you know to do all those things on your own, or was somebody guiding you saying, hey, let's test the length of these calls and this messaging?
I think a lot of it was organic. I was really lucky to be working also alongside Braden Young, who's the other co-founder of Sendoso and also has a sales background. So it was really sort of the two of us in the trenches with a lot of this, and he understood just in kind of founding it with Chris, had a lot of context in terms of like what we could do, what the market looked like, and a lot of the background, what competitors in the space were like. And then I think I brought a little bit more of that kind of the sales process and sales cycle experience coming from TalkDesk, where it was like, okay, we need to put, I remember the first time I jumped on a call with Braden, and actually taking a step back here, one thing I'd advise to anyone who wants to go be a first sales hire, even second or third, I basically said, okay, Chris, I'm in, but I want to come work with you guys for a day. And just sat with them, shadowed any calls that they had that day.
Like a 1-day internship.
Yeah. I was like, I want to come work for a day. I'm in, but you know, let's make sure that I don't drive you guys crazy, and let me make sure that I can have these conversations.
Yeah.
And so that was hugely valuable to do. But yeah, I think you just have to iterate live. What was that?
That's probably Richard dealing with his kids in the background.
Yes.
I thought you were pointing at the surf and sales sign behind you.
No,
I was like, in surf and sales.
Time to get out. So
I was like, I don't know how to work surf and sales in this combo, but surf and sales.
How did you navigate the transition from account executive to sales leadership? What were the things that were easy for you to pick up, and what's been the hardest bits to pick up?
Yeah. I was thrown into it, pretty by accident, I'd say, or kind of, it was out of necessity. It was kind of a point where we needed someone to step into that for the business. This was at the start of Q3 last year, probably 9 months ago. And we just kind of needed some sales leadership and needed the tribal knowledge to be sort of spread a little bit more effectively than it had been to that point. So what I knew I was good at was selling Sendoso, and what I knew I didn't have experience with was managing a team. But I knew I had kind of a great team there as a starting point, people that were great sellers, and that I could help them sell more Sendoso. So the first thing I did actually was I enrolled in a sales training program. I did it through a guy named Matt Cameron, you guys might have heard of.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, he's a good friend of ours. Absolutely.
Shout out to Matt in San Diego.
He moved. He's in Vegas now.
Oh, moved. Okay. What was the training? Was it a leadership training, sales management training?
Frontline sales management. So that was invaluable, and it was just a 2-day boot camp, and left with like pages of notes, and kind of had a playbook that I felt comfortable going to execute, with everything from defining our sales process to how to operate one-on-ones and set expectations within a team, just kind of tactical stuff. And that's been, hands down, the part that's still the most of a work in progress for me, is just the dynamic of managing a team and managing.
What's the hardest part for you still, managing a team?
I mean, it's tough every day. The hardest part is understanding that everyone responds differently to different management skills, and everyone kind of needs something different.
Yeah.
So one thing that I took away from that frontline course was to basically give your team a description of how you operate, so they understand that from you. Because I think you need to realize that that's going both ways, in terms of you're trying to figure out how, 5, 8, 10, 20 people respond to coaching. Do they prefer direct feedback? Do they what motivates them? So I handed that to my team on their first days. And one thing I aim to understand from them is what does this version of you look like, right? It's called like a me manual. That's what Matt calls it. So I give them my me manual, and I ask them sort of how do you want to be coached? What makes you more effective? How can I help? And that's an ongoing process.
Yeah. What advice do you give them about working with you, right? Aside from asking them, right? I love this me manual thing, and Matt's a genius at this stuff. So props to him. What kind of advice do you give those people? Like what's it like to work for Nick?
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to be as honest as possible in it. I kind of apologize up front in many ways. I'll say I like to joke around. I like to have a good time. I promise if I ever cross a line, please let me know, and I'll apologize for that. I think that the first line in it actually is I believe Sendoso will be a massively successful company, and I need you to believe that too. And I think that coming to work every day should be fun. And if at any point that's not the case, you need to come to me right away so that we can figure out what's going on and help adjust for that. That's, I think, one of the biggest things. And attitude is something that I highlighted in a lot, and something that I always am interviewing for. Like, so the two things I interview for are attitude and aptitude, I'd say loosely. And so in that manual, I express that startups are hard. Sendoso will be hard. But I need you to bring a positive attitude to work. And I understand there's times that are going to be hard and where that gets tricky. You're going to lose a deal. There's going to be, gaps in processes and stuff gets frustrating. But I think that positivity is a force multiplier, and I think negativity can be toxic. And I've seen that go wrong at startups, where the negativity starts to sort of feed itself.
Yeah. How are you testing and screening for aptitude through your recruiting process? I think everybody has a little bit of a different spin and a take on this. I'm curious how you solve for that.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough one, but one thing I like to do is give the candidate a real challenge that we're running into and see how they analyze it and break it down. So I'll say something. Yeah, so I'll say something really tactical, like, okay, so for Sendoso, for example, our sales cycle, to answer your other question, our sales cycle is 90 days. Our average deal size is $24,000. So, and there's a lot of SMB. My team's is higher than 24 because the SMB team drags that average down. But I'll give the candidate basically an outline, and I'll say, okay, so our first call is a demo. From there, you'll aim to validate the tech that it'll integrate with their systems and the business, right? That there's an ROI justification. One of the things that we struggle with is our time between our meetings, right? So the time between either our first call and our second call, third call. Our average time between meetings, if you analyze across our entire pipe, is about 20 days, which is way too long. There's obviously outliers that are dragging that up, but still, as an average, that's far too long. So I'll say, how would you reduce that? And it's really about understanding what questions they ask and how they dig in. And do I see sort of like the wheels turning in terms of ways to improve that? And it's like, okay, so have you guys tried this, or are you doing that? Or do you think that it's because you're not selling to power, or you don't have a strong enough champion, or are you validating the business need? And it's really like, how tactical do they get? I don't so much even care about the answer. It's really just like, how much are they getting excited about solving it almost.
What's a bad answer there? Like, just, I don't, not necessarily give it away, but that'll educate people to go, oh, I shouldn't say those kinds of things, right? Like, I think a lot of times people go into these interviews and they run into people who are really smart like you, and they don't understand, right? What would be a bad answer?
Well, I had one person say they would go for the close on the first call. That wasn't the best answer.
Right.
That'll speed up the sales cycle. It'll work or it'll die right away, right?
Yeah. And then that was obviously an interesting one. And then I think people who look for almost like a cheap out on it, where they're like, well, why don't you offer a free trial? And it's okay. Well, you don't think we've considered that kind of stuff, and like, that's clearly not part of this right now. So it's like, okay, I understand why you're saying that, but you're just looking for kind of a backdoor exit on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think
what's the best answer you've ever gotten? What's the best answer? And it'd be cool, because if someone ever listens to this and uses it, now you'll know, right? They've done really good research if they listen to this podcast before interviewing with you. What's been some of the better answers?
So I think the better answers become a conversation, actually. And it's really about understanding, it's the best questions and saying, okay, well, why do you think there's that gap between 2 and 3? Or what are your best sellers noticing that there isn't as much time? It's like, oh, well, yeah, our best sellers are performing better than the average on that. It's like, okay, what do they do differently on that piece right there? Right.
So when they do discovery on your process, that's what you're
Correct.
kind of looking for, right?
Exactly.
You
Yeah,
want them to ask more about discovery into our own process, which then tells you that they know how to do some kind of discovery in a sales process in general.
Exactly. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Cool.
What are some of the adjustments that you and your team are having to make, given the the lockdown or quarantine, whatever you want to call it. I think everybody's asking those kind of questions right now and looking for guidance, and
Mhm.
nobody has a playbook for this, right? So what have you done to try to keep your team's morale and team's performance up? Can you talk to us about some of these adjustments?
Yeah, so I'll touch on sort of like in terms of our team and our in management, and then I'll touch on the sales process. In terms of team, one thing that we're doing is every morning we all get on a Zoom at 8:30, and we did this wrong the first week, where we basically ended up having management talk at the team for 25 minutes, and it
Yeah.
was just incredibly boring. And we were saying the same stuff over and over again, and it was just Groundhog Day. This is the number, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So what we did to kind of reduce the monotony there was, starting at the beginning of last week, there is an AE that owns the meeting every day, and then there's a manager who supports that, and then our head of sales ops, Alex, has 5 minutes where he'll review what the data has been saying day over day. So it starts with the AE doing work from home cribs. So the AE will show us some aspect of their work from home setup or their house or something that kind of unique to them. One of our account managers, Steve, gave a demo to us on how he makes his morning smoothie. He's a big workout guy. Walked us through the whole smoothie.
Nice.
We
So
had one.
when it's I've heard through the rumor mill that you're like pretty big on keeping your hair put together and like really fancy.
Oh, okay. Kyle told you to give me this.
Yeah.
All right.
So
We got to put him and Scott Barker on there
it.
together.
So
Jeez.
when it's your turn, you're gonna give everybody like hair cutting tips and stuff, right? Since they can't go to the barber.
Better yet, get Scott Barker to come on as a guest
Yeah.
from Sales Hacker, because the two of you could do a whole spiel, right?
Yeah, Scott and I did a webinar a couple of weeks ago. There was a lot of hair in one call. That's good. Yeah, Cal, if you're listening to this, you're fired.
No, we want you to turn around and tell us some stuff about Kyle. Like,
I know.
In fact, we may have information about Kyle that you may
we'll,
not know.
We'll give him that. We'll give you insider information afterwards. So
yeah, I know.
you're changing up the meetings a little bit. The content of them, trying to make them more fun, more personal, things like that. What about the actual tactical selling strategy?
So, I mean, the tough part with the strategy thing is to your point, there's no playbook here. So
Right.
the biggest thing that I'm echoing to my team is let's sort of learn together on this, because the last thing I'm going to do is pretend to you all that I know how to sell through this. I don't, and no one does. So that's been one thing.
I love that answer, by the way. I think that's the correct answer for everyone.
Yeah, and I mean, credit to our CRO Sam on this stuff too. I mean, he sold through 08, and he's kind of said like, this isn't not the same, obviously, but one way that we kind of got through that was just recognizing that it was unprecedented, and just having that be your start from here moment is there's no playbook. And so the one thing that we can encourage and make sure that our team is doing is just being human. And that's one thing that's really natural for us, because it's part of our sales process already, is to encourage and challenge our customers to look at the way they interact with their prospects, their customers, and say like, how human are you really being? Are you connecting beyond your hope all is well, Gmail? And are you actually extending that, that sentiment with anything that's above and beyond in any way? So a lot of what we're doing right now is like, we'll use our own product, eat our own dog food, and even in emails, just we're stopping having asks, which I think is super counterintuitive to sales.
Yeah.
And at least, I had my head banged against the wall for many years that you always have an ask at the end of an email or any pitch.
So shifting toward much more just give, serve, right?
Right. And I think part of the theory there is, I think there are companies that are pausing spend, and we talked about this a little bit, Scott, with the uncertainty, but at the end of the day, it's driven by the uncertainty. That's sort of why there's anything that's frozen right now, whether it's, spending or hiring or whoever you are. And at some point that will end. We will know when this is over, whether it just sort of happens and it's all over, it's in 2 months or 6 months. And there's going to be companies that still have to go sell their product. right? And they still kind of have to go get it done. And they're going to have to, pick their head up and say, what does this look like now? And they're going to remember how people made them feel during that time. They're not going to remember the sales rep or they'll negatively remember the sales rep that was really pushy and was worried about his commission check in the middle of April while you had the kids at home and you're trying to figure out what to do. I mean, no one wants to get shoved into a sales process at that point, but everyone is very open right now to understanding and learning and taking meetings. And I think the wrong way to handle that is to say, hey, I need this signed by the end of April, when that's just totally unfair. People don't know if they can even do that. So I think leading with empathy and just kind of being a human and leaving people with a good feeling about how that interaction went is going to compound down the road.
When do you think you'll start to see, because you're on the front lines a lot more than I am,
Mm-hmm.
when do you think you'll start to see a brighter light? Like, do you guys look at it? Like, I'm curious, maybe even at the management level, do you guys sit down and have a conversation that says, hey, is anybody feeling like things are moving, or is everybody just looking at the data right now to help make that decision? Like, I'm curious as to how management is trying to view this, right? Because you certainly don't want to turn on the spigot, right? You don't want to start to flood people with bullshit. But and I like the slow drip campaign, right? Like the slow personalized stuff. But can you guys even get vision to that yet, or is it like we just don't see it yet, Richard? We've never even talked about it or anything.
I mean, I know it's something that's being talked about every day. I don't think that we know enough from how the numbers are moving through the funnel yet, right? Like we only have, let's say, 3-4 weeks of COVID data points to look at. So what we do know is in the past 2 weeks, we've had more top of funnel than average. What we don't know is how those are moving through the funnel compared to our pre-COVID
So
pipeline.
what is that? Yes, I love that. I love that you're saying, hey, we have pre-COVID data points or post-COVID data points or 3 weeks into it. What are COVID data points in your mind?
Well, I mean, I think you just draw a line in the sand, right? And you look at all your data before and after a certain date, and it's like, okay, we know that stuff's moving from, stage 1 to stage 2. We have this much stage 1 pipeline. It's moving on average this quickly. And so you almost need to split the data in half and look at it before and after to understand how it's behaving differently. But our credit to our product and engineering teams too, we're a little bit unique where we've been able to kind of, I don't want to say capitalize on this, but I'll say innovate for our customers to make sure that they have some features to leverage throughout this. Like if you're going to send someone a swag bag, it'll send them an email so they can confirm what address they want to receive it at, for example. So, and we put out some webinars that have had great traffic. So people are definitely looking for unique ways through this to connect with their prospects and their customers and their employees. And I think that's been a bit of a forcing function for us, at least the top of the funnel. But it still remains to be seen if that's going to behave differently. My assumption is yes, as it moves through the funnel.
I love what you said about drawing a line in the sand, because when I do training with people, I always ask about baselines, and I say, look, you need to define what's happened the day before, up until the day before Richard showed up, and then you got to measure, 30 and 60 days out what happens after, and more importantly, what happens the first 2 or 3 days to see if it's being implemented. Like it's the same process, right? Like you're just applying it in a different way. So the reason I'm bringing that up is that it's not like it's earth shattering or anything, but it's kind of like, wait a minute, we do know how to solve this kind of a problem if we put a formula to it, right? Like just like anything else. So in some ways it's hard because we don't know what the playbook is. In other ways, hey, wait a minute, there's something we do know how to do, and how do we adjust that for this particular situation?
Yeah. What are you guys seeing? And I'm trying to talk to obviously any kind of friends and other sales leaders in terms of how they're managing to this. And I think one piece of that is the sort of just the human management aspect of like, how do you kind of temper how your team is feeling and make sure that they feel obviously secure and safe through this and still as confident sellers. Like, do you guys hearing anything on that side, or is there any advice that you'd give there?
For me, there's been 3 camps, if you will. And
Yeah.
the first camp, and the one that I think is the right one personally, is the camp that you're in and everything that you described in terms of the adjustments and changes that you guys are making. Then there's the camp that is like, we need to all work 9,000 times harder than we ever have before. And, it's 7 days a week now, not 5 days a week. And it's 15-hour days, not 8-hour days kind of thing. And then there's the camp who's just like business as usual in a way. And just like, we have a job to do. We're just going to keep doing our job. And, it's all about making the right number of calls, and the math will just continue to shake out. So I don't know if Richard agrees or not, but what I've noticed is that I think most people fall into one of those three buckets right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm a little more tactical. I think that's why Scott and I are good business partners in a lot of ways. I get very tactical, and Scott can see the strategy, and we can merge stuff together. So for me, the question you asked is, how do you keep the team motivated? How do you keep them going, right? So for me, that comes down to, and I'm a big advocate about mental health. So that means I even wrote something the other day that I don't know that the work hour can be anything more than about 9 to 3:30, right? And if you've got kids and you're working from home, it's like, seriously, like that's the best you can do. And yeah, if someone's willing to do something off hours, that's fine. 9 to 3:30 also means really more like 6.5 hours total. So, some people I know a lot of people who have kids, and it's like from 7 to 9:30 at night, they're doing work because that's just when it fits. So a massive amount of flexibility. I think you need to say it out loud. I think you can say it to your team and say, look, we think it should be about this much. If you want to do more, do more. We do need to get these things done. You do have to create accountability. Tell us how you want to operate, right? So Nick, maybe reverse engineer the me book that you talked about?
Yeah, the me manual.
The me manual. Maybe all your team needs to go back and write their own me manual and share it with each other, so that then everybody can kind of get ideas about how they can do something together. And that builds a work of team, a work of trust, a work of camaraderie, a work of support for each other, problem solving, that you don't necessarily have to have all the answers, right? I think it helps build that culture of like what Sendoso is all about, which is about personalization. So I think that's a great way to do things. I'm a big fan, and I've worked with and trained Headspace, the meditation app. In fact, I know the head of revenue over there is creating stuff for companies to use it, either free trial versions for like 30 days or even heavy discounts and stuff like that. So I'm happy to connect you with her if you want to talk to her, if you guys aren't using something like that. I think encouraging people to get outside, telling people to go make your desk for an hour outside in the sunshine, like little shit like that is the stuff that I see working to help with the team. I do think you can find other gamification, right? You can do that if you think it's going to work. I do think having virtual power hours is still pretty cool, in the sense of like, you don't all have to be on the Zoom, but hey, everybody from 10 to whatever, we're going to do this. And as soon as something happens, hit it in the Slack channel. Because I know at the beginning, you're an in-office guy, you like that buzz. So how do we create that buzz? And again, maybe even turn that back over to the team to say, hey, I want to do something like this. What do you think? Would you guys get into it? Is there another way we can create that energy and buzz for an hour a day, right? Like, how do we do that? So I think I'm way more tactical, but I agree with Scott that it's way more about the value added email. I've been talking about this for a long time, that even when this is all over, you should have 2 or 3 steps in a sequence or cadence that ask for nothing in return. Like, hey, here's an article. Hey, did you know this? Hey, did you know that? Right? You yourself could write something as a leader to say, hey, I'm a big buzz in the room buzz guy, and here are the 6 things I had to adjust to as a leader, and just get your team to send that out. Say, hey, our manager put this together. Thought you and your manager would like it. I think stuff like that is super, super helpful and critical right now. So.
Yeah, that's great. I love how you guys hit on the kind of getting Scott the business and the sales process perspective, and then some of the tactical team stuff from you. That's super helpful.
Yeah,
that's the only reason we have a successful podcast. Scott just has,
I love it.
I'm the one who implements them all.
It's great. I'll give you another idea. One thing that we're doing with a ton of success right now is sort of we'll kind of give a gift that is in itself a gift for the recipient to give. So one thing we'll do is we'll send people a $20 digital gift that lets them pick to either make a donation to a charity at this time, or they can use the $20 to Uber Eats. And then the cool thing there is Uber Eats waive delivery fee from local restaurants who are obviously hurting right now. And so you can say, hey, I wanted to kind of support your local and order you lunch, or feel free to donate this to your favorite charity. Meals on Wheels is doing great stuff right now, etc.
What do you just out of curiosity, because you're in this sort of giving space, right?
Yeah.
And maybe you have a list, maybe you don't, but who are the people, if people do want to make a donation, even if it's through Sendoso or just on their own, like, let's give some love back to the world. What are the places you guys are seeing doing good things?
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to go too out on a limb here. I mean, the Red Cross, I think, is always a safe bet, right? And then there's I know Feeding America is doing great stuff. Meals on Wheels is doing great stuff. ASPCA, if you're passionate about animals, those are kind of the ones that we see are most popular, I'll say. But there's a ton of I know there's one out there that we're really trying to get on the platform right now. That's making sure that the kids who would be getting lunches at school are still getting lunch. And the name is escaping me right now. The challenge for us creating a process around some of these charities that are obviously doing a great job and moving fast to fill the gaps right now is they might not have the infrastructure to provide large scale digital gifts. So we have to kind of find workarounds and get creative there, but something that we're always working on. Definitely.
Cool. That's great. Well, thanks for spending some time with us here, Nick. We usually try to wrap the show up by offering to help our guests in any way, answer any questions that you might have. Is there anything that you can think of that Richard or I or both of us can do to help you and support the team?
Keep doing what you're doing, guys. I'll actually turn that back around on the audience here and say if there's anyone who's in an unfortunate circumstance and is laid off or knows someone who's laid off, I'm happy to do whatever I can to try to help that person at this time. I have connections at Bets Recruiting. I know you guys know Carolyn really well, and a friend of mine, Ian, started a company called the Cannon Project, which is helping entry-level sales. So I'd say kind of for all three of us, if we can help anyone in the audience that's without work get back on their feet, I'd love to.
Are you guys hiring?
Sendoso is hiring, yeah.
Okay. And where? What cities?
We are hiring in Arizona and in San Francisco.
But Arizona's not a city. You must have gone to ASU. What city? You didn't go to college either, did you, Nick?
Yeah, I guess I didn't, huh?
Boston college education right there.
Jeez. Well, flying to Phoenix, you drive to Scottsdale. Right.
It's just because no one considers Tucson a city, Richard.
Yeah.
That's okay. I'm okay with that.
It's assumed that everybody goes to Tempe, Scottsdale, Phoenix.
I'm happy to let the losers think that. That's okay.
All right, man.
Hey, Nick, thanks so much, buddy.
And we'll do everything
Thank you, guys.
to help everybody out there as well. So
thank you, guys. This is fun.
Good.
Take care.
Bye.